All right, Jesus Freak. Symbolic here. In response to your video, what is a Jesus Freak? Are you one? Where you explain the derivation of your username, which I didn't know until now that you picked up in the 1990s, I believe you said. Actually, I first heard the term Jesus Freak back in about 1971 when I was in junior high school. In those days, um, hippies and counterculture people called themselves freak, and it wasn't a negative term used by outside groups. It was a term used um, by the group itself, and it wasn't a completely negative. It didn't really have a horrible negative connotation, you know. I mean, people were proud of being freaks. It meant you were kind of like the beatniks, you know. It meant you were not a conformist, you know, that you were basically, you know, finding your own path, you know. Of course, by 1971, the basic what would you call it, hippie movement there had been a whole psychedelic period, so it also kind of meant that people were using psychedelic drugs, and which were considered by some to have a sort of a spiritual dimension to them, and some to produce insight or as a road to self-discovery or discovery. So there was a transcendental, exploratory, spiritual side. Um, God, I'm from San Francisco. I suppose you could tell I'm from San Francisco. So this is part of the psychedelic culture. So the freaks were cool people. I mean, many of us hung out with the freaks because they were the interesting people. They were the ones who were having really curious experiences and so sort of transcendental experiences and perceptive experiences. And at the same time, you had the Jesus freaks. It's just that they were interested in Jesus. You know, some very, very much into Jesus. Um, and it kind of like, in a sense, like LSD, you couldn't immediately enter that kind of world. They seemed to be in their own sort of world in a certain way, just like people who were on a psychedelic would. It's a subjective experience, you know. You know, I can point out that at the time the hippies had a sort of a communal lifestyle. There was a lot of sharing, a lot of love. Sound familiar? Um, so, you know, there are certain parallels between the hippie and the psychedelic movement and the sort of communal, loving Christian sort of movement, I guess you'd say, or principles or values. So in any event, there were freaks and there were Jesus freaks. It's just that the Jesus freaks were high on Jesus, you know. Um, you know, now there was also a connotation that these people were different, you know, but it was okay. It was non-conformity was considered a positive in those days. So when I actually first saw your name, I thought that that's what you were referring to. I didn't realize that, you know, you drew the etymology from actually the 1990s. But when I first heard the term in 1971, we didn't mean it to be a completely negative connotation. We weren't calling people freaks like circus freaks. The freaks were cool, man. Those were the people you wanted to hang out with. They were the really interesting people who had interesting experiences, you know. So anyway, just wanted to chime in there on your video on you know, how you got your username and the derivation of course your personal derivation is meaningful for you, but I just thought I'd jump back 20 years before that, 20 or 25 years before that, to when I think the term first arose. Psychedelic culture, my friend. That's where we got Jesus freaks. That's where we got the term Jesus freaks. Psychedelic culture. Peace and love.